Owen Mitchell sat alone at the corner table of Evergreen Steakhouse, watching the woman he'd been talking to disappear into the kitchen without explanation. 20 minutes of conversation, 20 minutes of connection he hadn't felt in 4 years, and she just walked away like he meant nothing. He pushed back his chair, ready to leave before the shame fully settled in. Then the front door burst open. A woman stumbled through, soaked in snow, trembling and breathless. She locked eyes with him and said the 5 words that would change everything. "I'm so sorry I'm late. I'm your date." Owen had spent the entire drive to Evergreen Steakhouse trying to convince himself this wasn't a betrayal. His daughter, Harper, had wrapped her small arms around his neck that morning and whispered that Mommy would want him to be happy. She was 8 years old and shouldn't have to worry about her father's happiness. But here they were, 4 years after the accident that took Claire on Christmas Eve. Owen still couldn't look at holiday lights without seeing the flashing red and blue of police cruisers reflected in snow. Travis had set this whole thing up. His business partner and closest friend had cornered him at the construction site 3 days ago, phone already in hand, showing him a profile picture of a woman named Autumn. "She's kind," Travis had said. "She's been through loss, too." Just one dinner, Owen. Owen had agreed mostly to stop the conversation, but also because some small part of him was tired of pretending he was fine. The restaurant smelled like pine and cinnamon when he walked in at 7 on the evening of December 20th. He'd worn the navy sweater Harper picked out, the one she said made his eyes look less sad. Travis had told him Autumn would be wearing a green sweater, dark hair, sweet smile. Owen spotted her almost immediately. A woman sat alone near the entrance, dark hair falling past her shoulders, wearing a forest green sweater. She was looking down at her phone, and something about the way she held herself made Owen think she might be nervous too. He cleared his throat softly when he reached her table. The woman looked up, and Owen saw warmth in her eyes that he hadn't expected. She smiled, genuine, reaching the corners of her eyes. Owen felt something shift in his chest. He introduced himself, stumbling over his words. She gestured to the empty chair, and Owen sat down. They started talking, and within minutes the conversation flowed naturally. She asked about his work, and he found himself telling her about Mitchell and Sons construction. She listened like she actually cared. Owen asked about her family, and she told him about growing up in Denver, about loving the mountains in winter. She mentioned losing someone close to her, and the way she said it made Owen feel less alone. He talked about Claire without saying her name at first, testing the waters. The woman didn't flinch or offer empty condolences. She just nodded with soft understanding. 20 minutes passed. Owen lost track of time, which was something that hadn't happened in years. He told her about Harper, about how his daughter was the only reason he got out of bed some mornings. The woman smiled at that, said she understood what it meant to live for someone else. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her expression changed. Something urgent flashed across her face and she stood quickly. She apologized, said there was something she needed to handle, and walked toward the back of the restaurant. He watched her disappear through a door marked "Staff Only." Owen sat there staring at the empty chair. Maybe he'd misread everything. Maybe she wasn't interested, and this was her polite way of ending the conversation. He was reaching for his coat when a young waitress approached. She had a nervous smile and asked if he was waiting for Miss Reed. Owen froze. The waitress explained that Miss Reed had called the restaurant about 30 minutes ago. Her car had broken down on Interstate 70 because of the snowstorm. She'd asked if someone could let her date know she was running late. The words hit Owen like a physical blow. Miss Reed, Autumn Reed, the woman he'd spent the last 20 minutes pouring his heart out to, was not his blind date. Owen felt heat crawl up his neck. He'd sat down at the wrong table. He'd told a complete stranger about his dead wife and his daughter, and she'd listened because she was polite or kind or too uncomfortable to correct him. The waitress asked if he wanted to wait for Miss Reed. She said it would probably be another 30 minutes, maybe longer, depending on the roads. Owen wanted to leave, but something stopped him. Maybe it was Harper's voice in his head telling him to try. Maybe it was exhaustion from carrying grief alone. Owen told the waitress he would wait. 45 minutes passed. The storm outside had intensified. He could see snow swirling past the windows, thick and relentless. The front door slammed open, and a gust of cold air swept through. Owen looked up and saw a figure stumbling inside, covered in snow. It was a woman. Her hair plastered to her face, her coat soaked through. She was shaking either from cold or exhaustion, or both. When her eyes landed on Owen, she started walking toward him. She reached his table and stopped, breathing hard. She apologized immediately, words tumbling out. Her car had died on the highway. Her phone battery had run out. She'd managed to get a ride from a stranger heading into the city, but they'd only been able to drop her off 2 miles away. She'd walked the rest of the distance through the storm because she'd promised to be here. Owen stared at her. This was Autumn Reed, his actual blind date. The woman who had just walked 2 miles through a blizzard to keep a promise to a man she'd never met. He stood up and told her it was okay. Autumn nodded, still apologizing, and sank into the chair across from him. The woman in the green sweater appeared then, carrying a thick blanket and a mug of hot cocoa. She draped the blanket around Autumn's shoulders and set the mug on the table. She looked at Owen with something knowing in her expression, something kind. She told him it looked like his real date had arrived, then wished him good luck before walking away. Owen realized then that she was Maya, the restaurant manager, and she'd known about his mistake all along. They started talking, awkward at first. Autumn explained again about the car and the phone and the stranger. Owen told her about the mix-up, about sitting at the wrong table. Autumn laughed at that, a soft sound that seemed to surprise even her. The conversation shifted. Autumn asked about his daughter, and Owen found himself talking about Harper with pride and protectiveness. Autumn smiled and told him about her younger sister Lily, a high school senior who was too smart for her own good. Owen heard the weight in her voice when she talked about Lily. They were both living for someone else. Autumn mentioned her mother briefly, just enough for Owen to understand that she'd lost her too. The grief in her eyes was familiar, and Owen felt that fragile connection start to form again. They stayed at the restaurant until 10. The staff started cleaning up around them, but no one asked them to leave. Owen and Autumn exchanged phone numbers before they walked out into the cold. The snow had stopped and the streets were quiet under a blanket of white. Owen offered to drive her home, and Autumn accepted. When he dropped her off at her apartment building, Autumn thanked him for waiting. Owen told her he was glad he did. She smiled, and for a moment he thought about kissing her, but it was too soon. He drove home thinking that maybe Harper was right. Maybe it was okay to try being happy again. Owen texted Autumn the next morning, asking if she and her sister wanted to come to his workshop that afternoon. Harper had been begging to make wooden ornaments for the tree. When Autumn replied yes immediately, Owen felt something close to excitement. They arrived at 2 that afternoon, December 21st. Autumn stood on the porch with a girl who had to be Lily. Where Autumn looked warm and open, Lily looked guarded. She had her arms crossed, and her expression was carefully neutral. Harper grabbed Lily's hand and pulled her toward the workshop, chattering about all the ornaments they were going to make. Lily let herself be dragged along, and Owen caught the smallest hint of a smile at the corner of her mouth. The workshop became loud with Harper's voice and the sound of sandpaper scraping against wood. Owen showed them how to cut basic shapes, how to smooth the edges. At some point, Lily moved closer to Harper, showing her how to paint tiny details with a thin brush. The younger girl looked up at Lily adoringly, and Lily's expression softened. Autumn caught Owen's eye across the workbench and smiled, a smile that said she saw it too. When it was time to leave, Harper hugged Autumn without asking permission first. She asked if she could come back soon. Autumn promised she would. The next day, December 22nd, Autumn invited them to her apartment to bake gingerbread cookies. Autumn's apartment was small, tucked into an older building on the east side of Denver. The kitchen was barely big enough for all of them, but they made it work. Their shoulders brushed, and neither of them moved away. Autumn asked him about Claire gently, and Owen found himself answering. He told her about the accident, about how it had happened on the way home from a Christmas party. Autumn didn't offer the usual platitudes. She just listened. And when he finished talking, she told him about her mother. She'd died 2 years ago from cancer, slowly and painfully. Autumn had watched her fade away while trying to keep Lily from falling apart. She'd given up her own plans for college to take care of her sister. Owen understood. Later, Lily pulled Autumn aside. Their voices carried. Lily told her sister that she could see what was happening, that Autumn liked this man and his daughter. She said she didn't want Autumn to give up anything else for her. There was something unsaid between them. They ordered pizza and ate it on the floor of the tiny living room. When they finally left, it was after 9. Owen sat in the dark living room and thought about how dangerous it was to start hoping again. December 23rd arrived with fresh snow and clear skies. They met at 6 when the lights turned on. The festival was crowded with families and couples walking through rows of vendor booths. Harper held Owen's hand on one side and Lily's on the other. They stopped in front of the enormous Christmas tree in the center of the square. Harper stared up at it with her mouth open, and Lily stood beside her, equally mesmerized. Harper turned to Autumn and asked if she was going to stay with them. The question came out of nowhere, innocent and direct. Harper clarified, asking if Autumn was going to come back and visit them again, or if this was the last time. There was fear in her voice, the kind that came from losing someone before. Autumn knelt down so she was eye level with Harper. She told her she wasn't going anywhere. She promised she'd come back as many times as Harper wanted her to. Harper threw her arms around Autumn's neck. When they got back to the car, Owen walked them to the door. Autumn touched his arm. She thanked him for the evening, for including them, for making Lily smile. Owen told her it was easy because she made Harper happy. They stood there in the cold hallway, close enough that Owen could see the snowflakes melting in Autumn's hair, and he almost kissed her. But Lily opened the door then, and the moment broke. Christmas Eve morning arrived bright and cold. Autumn called while they were eating. She asked if she could come over, said she had a recipe for cinnamon rolls her mother used to make. Owen said yes without thinking. An hour later, she was standing in his kitchen, flour on her hands and a smile on her face. Owen stood back and watched them together, and he felt something shift inside him. It wasn't just hope anymore, it was something deeper. They were still sitting at the table when Autumn's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and Owen saw her expression change. It went from relaxed to tense in the span of a heartbeat. She answered, and when she hung up, her hands were shaking. Autumn looked at Owen, and there were tears in her eyes. She told him it was a job offer. Phoenix Financial Group wanted her as their senior accountant. The salary was $85,000 a year, but it meant moving to Arizona. It meant leaving Denver. Owen felt the words hit him like a physical blow. Phoenix, Arizona, 1,000 miles away. Autumn told him she had to take it, that this was the opportunity she'd been waiting for. They wanted her to start on January 2nd. That gave her just over a week. Owen had just signed a contract with the Denver City Council for a 6-month construction project. If he backed out, his company would be ruined. Harper was settled in school, had friends, had a life here. Owen reached across the table and took Autumn's hand. He told her he understood that she had to do what was right for Lily. Autumn squeezed his hand and told him she was sorry. They were saying goodbye before they'd even had a chance to begin. Autumn left that afternoon. She touched his face, her hand warm against his cheek, and told him she wished things were different. Owen said he did too. Then she turned and walked away. Harper cried herself to sleep. Owen sat in her room stroking her hair and telling her it would be okay, even though he didn't believe it himself. When she finally fell asleep, he went downstairs and sat in the dark living room staring at the Christmas tree. Owen thought about how quickly hope could turn into loss. December 28th arrived with a weather warning. A massive winter storm moving down from Canada that was supposed to be the worst in a decade. The storm hit around noon. Snow fell so thick that Owen couldn't see across the street. Harper's school had sent out a message saying the buses were running behind schedule. When 2 hours passed and Harper still wasn't home, he started to feel the familiar flutter of panic in his chest. He called the school and they told him the buses were stuck on Interstate 70, just past the mountain pass. Interstate 70, the same stretch of highway where Claire had died. Owen felt the room tilt. He ran to his truck. The roads were barely visible under the snow. When he got to the highway entrance, a police officer flagged him down. The cop told him the interstate was closed. Owen tried to explain about Harper. The officer was sympathetic but firm. He said Owen needed to go home and wait. Owen sat in his truck on the side of the road. He couldn't go forward and he couldn't go back. He was stuck, just like 4 years ago. His hands were shaking when he pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts. His thumb hovered over Autumn's name. He typed the message without thinking. Harper was stuck on Interstate 70. He couldn't get to her and he needed help. He sent the message anyway because he didn't know what else to do. Owen sat there for 15 minutes before his phone buzzed. Autumn's response was 3 words. She said she was coming. His phone rang then, and it was Autumn's voice on the other end, tight with determination and fear. She told him she'd never actually made it to Phoenix. She and Lily had only gotten as far as Colorado Springs before Lily got sick with a bad flu. They'd checked into a hotel to wait it out, but now Autumn was getting in the car and she was heading north. Owen tried to tell her not to come, that the roads were too dangerous. Autumn cut him off. She told him Harper needed her, and that was all that mattered. Autumn hung up, and Owen sat in his truck praying. Owen's phone rang at 6. A woman's voice told him the children were safe. The buses had been cleared, and they were bringing the kids to a warming station at a fire department near the highway. The fire station was crowded with parents and crying children. Owen pushed through the crowd searching for Harper's face. He found her sitting on a bench near the back, wrapped in an emergency blanket. She looked small and scared, but she was alive. Owen ran to her, dropping to his knees and pulling her into his arms. Harper pulled back and looked at him with wide eyes. She told him Autumn had come. Harper said a woman had shown up at the bus before the fire trucks did, that she'd climbed through the snow and helped get the doors open. She'd made sure all the kids were okay. The woman had known her name, had asked if she was Owen Mitchell's daughter. When Harper said yes, the woman had hugged her and told her everything would be all right. Owen looked around the fire station, searching the crowd for Autumn's face. A firefighter said she'd left about 20 minutes ago. She'd refused medical attention even though she looked exhausted. She'd told them she needed to get back to her sister, who was sick and waiting at a hotel in Colorado Springs. Travis insisted on taking Harper home. He told Owen to go find Autumn. Owen drove south through the clearing storm. The hotel was a small chain off the highway. He knocked on the door and Lily answered. She looked tired and pale. She recognized Owen immediately and stepped aside to let him in. Autumn was sitting on the edge of one of the twin beds, staring at her hands. She looked up when Owen entered, and the exhaustion in her eyes made his chest ache. He asked if she was okay, and she nodded, but her hands were still shaking. Owen sat down beside her and took those shaking hands in his own. He told her thank you, told her she'd saved Harper's life. Autumn shook her head and said she'd had to come. Lily cleared her throat from across the room. She told Owen there was something he needed to know. Lily pulled an envelope from her backpack. She handed it to Autumn, whose hands started shaking harder. Lily explained that she'd gotten a scholarship, a full ride to the University of Colorado Boulder. The letter had come 2 weeks ago, but she'd hidden it because she knew Autumn would turn down the Phoenix job if she found out. Autumn stared at the letter, tears running down her face. Lily's voice broke when she answered. She said she was tired of Autumn sacrificing everything for her. She told Autumn she deserved to have a life too, to fall in love, to build something for herself. The scholarship meant they could stay in Denver. It meant Autumn didn't have to take the Phoenix job if she didn't want to. Owen felt hope bloom in his chest. He asked Autumn what she wanted to do, and she looked at him with those tear-filled eyes. She said she wanted to stay, but she couldn't use the scholarship as an excuse to give up a good job. Owen told her about an idea he'd had. His company was growing and needed someone to manage the finances properly. It would be a legitimate position, senior financial manager for Mitchell and Sons Construction. The salary would be comparable to what Phoenix had offered. Autumn looked at him for a long time. She asked if he was sure if this was really what he wanted. Owen told her he'd never been more sure of anything in his life. He said he wanted her to stay, wanted Harper to have her in her life, wanted to see where this thing between them could go. He told her he was terrified of losing someone again, but he was more terrified of never trying. Autumn's answer was to kiss him. It was soft and tentative. Owen kissed her back, his hands coming up to cup her face, and for the first time since Claire died, he felt like he was allowed to be happy. They drove back to Denver together the next morning. Harper was waiting at home with Travis, and when she saw Autumn walk through the door, she screamed and ran into her arms. Autumn held her tight, promising again that she wasn't going anywhere. Autumn leaned into Owen's side and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. She asked him if he was ready for this, for the complications and the work it would take. Owen said he was. He'd been running from happiness for 4 years, and he was tired of running. 1 year later, Owen found himself back at Evergreen Steakhouse on Christmas Eve. He'd reserved the same corner table where everything had started. Autumn sat across from him now, wearing a green sweater that reminded him of that first night. Harper and Lily were at the next table over, trying and failing to contain their giggles. Owen reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. His hands were steadier than he'd expected them to be. When he opened the box to reveal the ring inside, Autumn's breath caught. He told her he'd been thinking about this for months, about what it meant to build a life with someone after loss. He said he'd learned that loving someone again didn't mean forgetting the people who came before. It meant honoring their memory by choosing to be happy. He asked her to marry him. Autumn said yes before he finished asking. She was crying again, but this time it was the good kind of tears. Owen slipped the ring onto her finger, and Harper and Lily erupted in cheers. Other diners started clapping. Owen pulled Autumn close and kissed her, while their daughters laughed, and the restaurant, full of strangers, celebrated with them. Later that night, Owen and Autumn stood in front of the Christmas tree. Autumn leaned her head on Owen's shoulder and told him she was glad she'd walked 2 miles through a snowstorm to meet him. Owen said he was glad he'd waited. They stood there in the soft glow of the Christmas lights. 2 people who'd learned that sometimes the best gifts come wrapped in second chances, and sometimes the person you're meant to find is the one who refuses to give up on you, even when everything tells them they should.